Hello and welcome to Web Vibes Only, where we talk about all things web and web adjacent. It is almost a wrap on the year 2025, and we thought it would be fun to cover the state of three big frameworks in web and some of the meta frameworks that we have. I'm Ankita, and with me we have Kyler Johnson. How are you doing, Kyler?
Hey, I'm doing great. It's been a big year for web development. I'm excited to get into this overview.
Me too. There's been so much going on. So let's get started. First up, we have Angular. The team of Angular had been super busy pushing out new features and improvements throughout the year. Like always, we had two major releases this year, version 20 and 1. But the team's major focus was to make the framework zoneless. What we mean by that is that Zone.js is no longer a dependency. You don't have to, starting with, you don't really need to include it. So you have smaller bundle size and it increases the global performance overhead. It always used to be this black box that Angular developers struggled to understand, but just had kind of accepted it as part of their lives. And now, because of Signals and a shift in how reactivity is being handled in Angular, the whole change detection mechanism within Angular no longer relies on monkey patching detection cycles and tracking every single event through Zone.js. It's really a big win, both for developers and the customers who are interacting with an Angular application. They notice the fine improvements in performance. The second big thing was we saw stability of a lot of Signal APIs with V20, linked signal effects, and for whatever you want, there's a Signal API for it for all your asynchronous reactivity needs. And we saw some other Signal APIs be exposed in the framework, like Resource API and HTTP Resource API for asynchronous tasks. But the biggest thing for Signals API was the release of experimental signal forms. Angular developers had been wanting an enhanced and improved form experience for a long time, and signal forms deliver on that. And speaking of developer experience, we saw a lot of improvements in that area. We saw AI integration via the MCP. We have Angular Tutor, AI tutor that, based on your level of proficiency, help you understand certain concepts about Angular that you might not be familiar with or might struggle with. And we can also see a clear signal graph visualization in Angular DevTools, more detail about the router, and there's also so much information in Chrome DevTools that you can see specific to Angular applications, that it helps with profiling and noticing any performance blocks that you might have in your Angular application. So overall, the framework has delivered on its promises for whatever they had been focused on for the developers. And we also have a new mascot, which is kind of exciting. So it's been a busy year for Angular.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are all great things in Angular. That's a huge win for the Angular team and for a lot of people out there that are using Angular in their day-to-day jobs. It's getting easier to use and just a lot more fun to work with. Okay. The big thing in React this year in 2025 was the release of React 19.2 and the React compiler. But that's pretty big. It didn't have a compiler before. The question comes, why are they shipping a React compiler now? And the reason being is because it offers better performance and faster interactions in the bundled build. It also does a lot of things. One of the biggest things it does to improve developer experience is before, to kind of help with unnecessary component re-renders, you had to do a lot of memoization type things like use memo, use callback, React memo, that sort of stuff. It uses analysis to stabilize values and like components at build time to prevent unnecessary re-renders. The goal for this is to eliminate or dramatically reduce the need to manually memoize things in React. Some people are reporting significantly. The other big thing, of course, is React server components. We kind of started to see that before 2025, but it's taken on a much more central role in 2025, allowing data fetching right there in your React components that gets executed on the server. React 19 5.2 also came with a few new hooks that are going to ease a lot of the developer pain around dependency management and use effect and that sort of stuff. One example of that is the use hook that will allow you to handle promises and context directly in your rendering logic in React. That's just one example. There's quite a few pretty interesting ones there. That kind of sums up the big things happening in the React world in 2025.
Yeah, sounds like they've been busy also.
Yeah, React compiler is a huge step.
Definitely. Okay, so the next big web framework that we all love is Vue.js. And even though Vue 3.6 has not been released yet, but it's coming soon, some of the major shifts have been the massive reactivity improvements with the adoption of signals, like all other frameworks are doing. Alien signals is what they're being referenced as. And by moving to this approach, we have been seeing tremendous improvements with no breaking changes, which is always a concern. And they've also had this experimental compilation mode called Vapor mode that also no longer relies or needs virtual DOM. And there's a significant improvement in performance that can be noticed. Okay, now I think we should move on to the meta frameworks, because what is web without our web meta frameworks?
I'll jump right into Analog.js, which is Analog shipped V2 recently, and that brought with it VTest 3 compatibility, some bundle size optimizations, a bump in its Vite dependencies and capabilities. For those that don't know what Analog is, it supports Markdown by default. It gives you file-based routing. It's still the Angular that you know and love, but it glosses over a lot of the boilerplate that you don't have to implement in Angular anymore with Analog. So you get a lot of stuff for free with Analog out of the box, like hybrid rendering options and that sort of stuff. Server rendering options, you can easily turn it off. It's built on top of Nitro server engine. It's a great meta framework. If you're into Angular, it's definitely worth checking out.
Yes, absolutely. And we also are big fans of all the contributors to Analog.js, and we support that team and that community a lot. They've been doing great work for this.
Absolutely.
Okay, moving on. Remix V3 has abandoned React in favor of a specialized pre-React fork. So they're no longer a React meta framework per se, but it's been really interesting to look at the direction in which they've headed. It's partly because of the backing from Shopify. They have shifted their focus from trying to be a React meta framework to being more focused on having this model first architecture where the framework is optimized both for humans and AI and LLM models, because they intend to build on top of native JavaScript and web APIs. And they just want to focus on performance, having zero build time because everything is built on runtime, and just revisiting everything that the framework really stood for.
I think that's great. Remix is they're kind of doubling down on this paradigm shift. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays into the web going forward, especially with AI taking a bigger and bigger role there.
It's not that they shifted their focus because of AI, but it is definitely going to help all things AI a lot, the way that they're building it out. And it's something definitely to watch out for in 2026.
Absolutely. Moving on to SvelteKit. SvelteKit had some big things happening this year. Some things that were highly anticipated. So it comes with faster compilation, faster builds. It continues to build on Svelte runes that were introduced with Svelte 5, SvelteKit's signal-based reactivity API. They've introduced here recently remote functions, which kind of act as like an RPC, remote procedural calls. So when it executes in a server context, you can basically have direct and safe access to database. When it executes on the client, it will automatically stand up APIs in the background and make a secure call from your client to your server for you. At that point, when you import that remote function into a client and it's executing in the client, it's a wrapper around the fetch, except you don't have to write all that code. Framework handles it for you, which is pretty amazing. Then the other thing that helps a lot is async SSR. This will allow you to use await anywhere in your app without any boundaries. If you have data depending on the result of a promise in your template, you can just use await anywhere. You're no longer confined to where you can use await in SvelteKit applications. With developer experience, there's also some better integrated type safety, especially like with routing and the search parameters and that sort of thing. Nice little autocomplete type stuff you get with your editors there.
Wow, yeah, it's hashtag winning for all the developers for sure. Lots of great things there.
For sure.
And next, we have Nuxt. We did a very detailed video about all things Next in our channel, and I'll link that in our show notes. This year has been really great for Next with a stable release of version 4.0. Vercel began backing Next.js, and that was also huge for the ecosystem, specifically because Next UI Pro, which was previously a paid offering, is now free and open source starting version 4. That is an incredible opportunity for people to build upon this framework without having to feel the financial burden of leveraging some of the highly advanced UI libraries that we see out there. And Nuxt Studio, which is a module allowing users to directly edit Nuxt content sites in production with real-time preview, is also now free and open source. Version 4, we saw improved project structure, better type safety, clear distinction between app and API layers, and they're also heavily focused on AI native development with the Nuxt MCP servers. So it's kind of exciting.
In 2025, Nuxt rapidly became my favorite framework to work with for a lot of reasons. In the projects that I'm using with Nuxt, I no longer have any pain points there. I don't think I've been able to say that about a framework in a long time, maybe ever.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Going on to Next.js, we had Next.js v16 release. This was all about addressing a lot of concerns that people had with Next.js. We've heard about compile times being very, very slow with Next. And v16, they were the Turbo Pack officially becomes the default bundler. They're seeing up to 10 times faster app refreshes and 2 to 5 times faster builds. There's some significant improvements there with Turbo Pack as the default bundler. Another issue that people have had is the lack of granularity around cache control in Next.js and some not very intuitive things that happen with caching in Next.js. And that's become a pretty big issue that people have had with Next.js. Next 16 went a long way toward addressing most, or if not all of those issues. They introduced several new caching APIs that allow a much more granular control over data and components that are getting cached and how you can, update the cache and that sort of stuff. So definitely worth looking at if you like Next.js, but you've had some pain points there that kind of led you away from it. It might be worth revisiting. It also brings partial pre-rendering and improved routing. This is another pain point for Next.js. A lot of developers that use the middleware, middleware.ts file. It didn't always behave like you thought it would in certain contexts. With v16, it brings a new file called proxy.ts, and I haven't had a chance to play around with this personally yet, but what I'm seeing is a lot of people are saying that this is a big improvement. Some of the issues they had with middleware TS has now been resolved with this. So, your mileage may vary depending on the context in which you're executing this, whether you're on the edge or, running on a node server somewhere. It's definitely worth checking out.
Sounds like it. Yeah, there are, as always, so many things to pick and choose from and experiment with and play around with, and not enough time in this world to do all of that. So that's
Absolutely.
I would say that's a good problem to have. I would rather have, for each feature that I want, have more choices than so. But one thing that you all may have noticed us consistently mentioned throughout were signals. And it's kind of fascinating that they have become this underlying solution for reactivity across frameworks. And signals were proposed to be part of JavaScript, I think sometime last year, or maybe, sometime in 2024. And I think that would tremendously change the way we develop once that happens.
Signals are taking over the web, and it's easy to see why. There's been this long-standing problem where there's this performance bottleneck in web frameworks, and it has to do with making sure the UI is in sync with state, right? Different frameworks have been trying to solve this for a long time. And what a lot of them do is some variation of reconciliation or diffing algorithm using the virtual DOM. They find differences between the actual DOM and the virtual DOM based on the state of the application, and then they do some sort of diffing algorithm to figure out what parts need to change. Signals kind of eliminate the need for that altogether. Signals maintain a signal graph under the hood, and that tracks dependencies. When a piece of state changes, your framework can know exactly what piece of the UI needs to be updated. The granularity of reactive synchronization between state and your UI is really fast. You don't need to run these big diffing algorithms anymore. Change detection becomes really granular, very specific, and we're seeing a lot of performance benefits from that, but also better memory management. So this is really helping frameworks to work toward eliminating things like these big, massive diffing algorithms. And some are even not shipping the virtual DOM at all, resulting in a significantly smaller bundle size. SvelteKit's one of those, Solid.js is another. Vue is working on experimental vapor mode, which removes that. It's Signals are paving the way to, better. It's revolutionizing framework development in general. But it also gives developers a little bit more friendly way to do this, to handle reactivity and to manage you don't have to manage dependency graphs and that sort of thing anymore. Like the signal graph tracks that for you. It's just, signals are revolutionary. Even the React team is experimenting with signals right now. So
I think of what all the frameworks will be able to achieve if it's just underlying part of JavaScript. And you can go and look at the T639 proposal for Signals on GitHub. It's out there for everyone to view and comment on. It's the implementation that is being proposed right now for Signals in JavaScript is the closest to how Angular has implemented Signals in their framework, which I think speaks volumes to their implementation also. If we can have all the frameworks agree on how reactivity should be handled in a framework, think of how powerful that is for developer velocity, for just any developer who has expertise in any framework will understand how to handle reactivity in any framework, basically. So it's really a win-win situation for web frameworks all over, and a really cool tool to have in our tool belt.
I'm so high on Signals now that I can't believe we went so long without them. And for anybody wanting to dive deeper and understand why Signals work, how they work, Ryan Carniato, the creator of Solid.js, he kind of brought on this signal revolution with his implementation. And he has some incredibly interesting blog posts about how he did that, how he thinks about it. And it will fundamentally change how you view web frameworks. Very interesting reads.
His ideology around what Signals should be and how they should be implemented heavily influenced Angular team's direction into the implementation of Signals. And I think all the other frameworks are taking notice of it and the massive improvements that they're seeing in applications who have adapted Signals. Even YouTube runs on Signals now. We're seeing tremendous improvements across all scales. That's really exciting. That who knows, in 2026 maybe the proposal will be standardized, although it takes forever for such things to happen. Hey, who knows? Visual thinking.
It's going to be interesting to see how they do that too.
Yeah.
Because Signals is more of a philosophy or a technique. It's not necessarily a spec. So it's going to be interesting to see how that translates to the web. For example, in Solid.js, their signal implementation is based on a directed acyclic graph structure. And Angular's implementation, they needed something a little bit different because of the way Angular works under the hood. So it's based on a bidirected graph structure.
Yeah.
So to see what the core web implementation might be one day is going to be really interesting, what that means for frameworks and how that may change the way frameworks are built from that point forward. So interesting stuff.
Yep, definitely. All right. So that's a wrap on a video about a wrap on all frameworks and meta frameworks in 2025. And hope you have a healthy and safe end of 2025. And we'll see you next year.